Welcome to our deep dive session. Today we are unpacking a rather fascinating historical puzzle about John the Baptist, specifically the very slim account we have from Josephus.
Absolutely. I'm ready to get into it. So, we're saying almost everything we know about John from an external source is just a few sentences from Josephus, correct?
Exactly. Yep. Josephus, a Romanized Jewish historian, just gives us a brief paragraph that sums up the whole story, from his moral preaching to his execution by Herod. It's like a snapshot, really, not the full cinematic drama you might expect.
Right, and in this account, he's not portrayed as a messianic figure, but just, a good man who preached virtue, isn't it?
Absolutely. Josephus describes him as a moral preacher who urged everyday people to live righteously and be pious. But, interestingly, he doesn't delve into any baptism of Jesus or any of those elaborate supernatural connections that we see in the New Testament.
Exactly. It's intriguing how later Christian texts really amplify the story. There's the wilderness sermons, the divine symbolism, and even the notorious beheading tale with a platter. But Josephus sticks strictly to the essentials.
Right. You see, Josephus mentions that John's execution was essentially a political move by Herod Antipas because people were so moved by his influence. And it's just a short neutral statement, no mentioning of grand theological events.
True. And it kind of makes you wonder, why does this one paragraph become the cornerstone of all external historical evidence about John the Baptist?
Yeah, you're spot on there. For almost 2,000 years, that's really all history has to back up his existence beyond the gospel narratives, and that has sparked plenty of debate.
Right, and it's almost as if every detail we associate with John, from his fiery sermons to his martyrdom by Herod, comes entirely from Christian storytelling rather than from independent historical records.
Well, exactly. Some scholars like John P. Meyer and Paula Fredriksen argue that Josephus's account is authentic, unadulterated by later Christian embellishment, matching his usual language and worldview. But then others like Robert Eisler and Robert Price suggest later gospel writers borrowed this framing to create a prophesied martyr narrative.
Yeah, that divergence is really fascinating. It's almost like two separate storytelling traditions, a sparse, politically motivated report versus a full-blown symbolic account.
Exactly. And when you sift through it, you find that Josephus's passage purposely omits all the heavenly connections. No reference to the baptism of Jesus, no prophecy of a coming Messiah, just what you might call a more practical, down-to-earth account.
Right. And it's that divergence which really highlights the nature of historical documentation versus myth-making. The gospel accounts, written decades later, add layers of theological meaning that are, perhaps, more reflective of the era's needs.
Yes, indeed. It's like comparing a quick snapshot with a detailed animated movie, you might say. The gospel narratives, they're full of symbolic imagery, like, that dramatic dance at Herod's feast that doesn't even appear in Josephus's writing.
Exactly. That party scene with Herod and Herodias' daughter is pure cinematic storytelling, not historical record. I always thought it was a bit theatrical, too.
Totally. And, scholars like Geza Vermes even say this brief piece is the sole independent evidence for John's existence. It's almost as if all of Christian myth has been erected around a flicker of truth from Josephus.
Right, and then there's Sean Freen, who calls it a political execution turned into sacred drama. That makes you, really rethink the sources, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yes. It highlights how narratives can shift, how a politically motivated event gets reinterpreted through a theological lens over time. The gap between history and storytelling becomes really, stark.
Yeah, and I have to ask, do you think it's fair to say that the gospel writers might have used Josephus as a sort of historical scaffold, while filling in the gaps with, well, imaginative theology?
That's a good question, and I'd respectfully challenge that a bit. While it's clear that Josephus provides a foundation, His passage is so minimal that the Gospel writers really had to invent a lot around it. So it's not merely a scaffold, it's more like a spark that ignited an entire myth-making process.
I see what you're saying. It was like they had a little kernel of history and then expanded it into a full narrative to resonate with their beliefs and the needs of their community, right?
Yep. It's like, you know, baking a cake. Josephus gives you a basic ingredient, and then the Gospel writers decided to add layers of icing, elaborate decorations, and even a story around it.
Totally. And it's interesting how different Gospels handle this in varied ways. For example, Mark provides a vivid, almost lurid recounting of John's death, while John's own Gospel basically omits it altogether.
Yes, indeed. Mark's version is all about the spectacle, the birthday feast, the dance, the grisly platter, which, really plays into how narrative drama works in storytelling. Whereas in, like, John's Gospel, we have an almost ethereal representation of John as a witness to the light.
Right? And what do you make of the Mandaeans? Those who still revere John the Baptist as a true prophet.
Oh, that's a whole other fascinating angle. The Mandaeans have ancient texts and traditions that predate parts of the Gospels. They essentially flip the narrative, seeing John as the real prophet and even suggesting that he wasn't beheaded at all.
Yes, it's like they offer an alternative historiography, one that challenges the dominant Christian narrative today. Really makes you wonder, how much of what we know is shaped by the narrative needs of later generations rather than strict historical accuracy?
Absolutely, exactly. And this divergence underscores how storytelling shapes our understanding of historical events. What starts as a few lines in a historical account can transform into a rich tapestry of legend and myth, depending on who's telling the story.
Yeah, and it kind of serves as a cautionary tale about how history can be repackaged for different agendas. It's so interesting to see that contrast.
Totally. And if we zoom out a bit, think of it like, like a game of telephone over centuries. Josephus gives one message, and then as it's passed down and retold, each version adds its own dramatic flair until the original message is almost lost beneath layers of interpretation.
Yeah, that analogy really captures it. Each generation, each community, sorts and shapes the message in a way that suits their own social and religious needs.
Exactly, yeah. And, that's why the debate among scholars is so alive. Some argue that the Gospel writers are borrowing from historical anchors, while others believe they're reinventing history entirely to fit their narratives.
Right? And I find it really compelling how both sides of the debate bring different kinds of evidence to the table. It just shows that history is rarely black and white.
Absolutely, yes. And it's like, every new piece of research or reinterpretation peels back another layer of what might have been a much more mundane political event, turning it into a rich, symbolic narrative that continues to evolve.
Totally. And while Josephus might have been content with a brief mention, we get to see the immense creative energy of storytelling that reimagines it over the centuries.
For sure, indeed. And it's also a reminder that historical evidence can be minimal, yet its impact on collective memory and identity can be massive. You get a kernel of importance that, once shared, grows in ways that can sometimes obscure the original facts.
Exactly. And sometimes the layers of reinterpretation can be so convincing that we almost forget what the actual historical record said, right?
Yes, indeed. And it leaves us with that persistent, intriguing question. Did the Gospel writers simply scaffold their narratives on such a tenuous historical base? Or was there more truth lurking in that brief account than we originally thought?
Well put. It's a dialogue between history and myth, where both are essential to understanding the full picture. I'm left pondering how much of our historical narrative is shaped by what survives versus what is imagined.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this subject endlessly fascinating. It forces us to re-examine our sources, question our assumptions, and appreciate the complex interplay between fact and storytelling.
Definitely. This discussion has truly opened my eyes to the intricate dance between history, myth, and the needs of a community over millennia.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, It's clear that even a few sentences from history, like Josephus's account, can spark centuries of dialogue, debate, and, well, passionate storytelling.
Agreed. Thanks for such an engaging and thought-provoking chat. Definitely a deep dive into the stories that shape our world.
Thank you. And remember, keep questioning and exploring the past, because sometimes the truth really is stranger and more fascinating than fiction.